Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with these nerds.
Nathan Nerdarch.
Nerdarch is Ted.
Hey, you guys want different ways to use arcane spellcasting in your Dungeons & Dragons games? Nobody does it like Dark Sun.
Jump down the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy, the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
So we're delving back into Dark Sun, and we're talking about arcane spellcasters. If you want to get different when it comes to casting magic, specifically arcane magic, you can't get much more different in Dungeons & Dragons than when go visiting the world of Athas and the campaign setting of Dark Sun. This would be difficult to do in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. I think it would require new rules, but it would definitely make for an interesting thing to use with the game.
Now, the desert world of Athas was actually created because of the Defilers, because of arcane magic use.
They basically had nuclear winter, but it was caused by magic.
So the way magic works in the setting of Athas is that when you cast spells, you don't draw upon life force or magic from some kind of ambient source.
Well, so let's put it like most people are familiar with Forgotten Realms, I think. And in Forgotten Realms and in a lot of other worlds, they use what's called the weave, right? And they pluck from the weave and they can cast their spells from that, right? Well, in Athas, you don't have that. So you literally have to actually kind of contradicts what you said, but they actually use life force to do it. It's just different.
Right.
Than what you meant.
Yes.
You meant drawing the life force of sentient creatures, or more like animals and things like that. But in Athas, they absolutely use the life force, but they use the life force of the planet itself.
So at low levels, the easiest that they have the ability to draw from is the plants and vegetation, and it's you literally suck it dry. And
if you're not careful, you do.
If you're not careful, you do.
Let's kind of start at the beginning, right? Because
Sure.
there's two different types of arcane casters, right?
Yeah.
There's preservers and there's defilers. But before we even get into that, we should bring up the fact that on Athas, nobody likes spellcasters. If you're using arcane magic, the general populace pretty much hates you.
You got a bad rap.
You got a bad rap. Not only that, the rulers of the cities do not want you using arcane magic. They do it, but that's different.
Yeah. I mean, that's how you consolidate power. You're the most powerful spellcasters. You want no one else that could challenge you.
Only really spellcasters distinguish what kind of spellcaster they are. Now, there might be other people that are more learned or better educated and might see a difference, but for the most part, people are like, oh, we live in a shithole now, magic bad.
And logistically, if you're trying to grow crops and
In a desert.
not
Which
easy
is
to do.
Yeah.
And somebody comes by and is like, I'm an arcane caster. You want to kill them because they're going to destroy your crops. Even if they're a preserver and they're trying to, not take too much, they're going to still take stuff from your crops. It's still going to weaken your harvest.
Yeah, so now let's get into it. So preservers, okay, essentially what they do is they kind of spread out their influence and they reach further and further away from them, which is going to take longer and more energy on their part in order to cast their spells to work their magics. So depending on how verdant the area is near them determines how far they have to reach in order to not damage the land permanently, that it'll recover. And remember, when I say verdant, we are talking about a desert world.
And back in the day, that basically made it harder for them to gain levels because they needed to be more skilled to do exactly what you're talking about.
Right, yeah, that was represented in AD&D with them having a higher spell, or not higher spell progression, higher XP progression than the Defiler. Defiler, gained levels rather
Faster.
quickly. Yes, part of the Preservers, they had like an organization called the Vowed Alliance. They were basically like anti-defiling, and that they held that to be sacred. They were also kind of like a resistance force against the
rulers.
Yeah, the Dragon Kings, the Sorcerer Kings. So in their own way, they were like these, and they operated like kind of like terrorist organizations because they were cells. Each city had their own. They weren't connected, and that was in order to basically localize what they were doing. And they each had their own problem to deal with, which was their Sorcerer King.
And then on the other side of that, we have Defilers. As we talked about, they want the quickest route to power, and as Nate said, they had that lower XP progression. So that means they gained levels faster. So when they were to cast a spell, they would draw in energy quickly, and they didn't care about the land around them. So when they were to cast a spell, there was actually a chart that you could look. Okay, what type of terrain am I in? What level am I casting? Would determine how many yards around them just became ash and would not grow for hundreds, if not thousands of years.
In later editions, they brought back the Defiler and Dark Sun, and they kind of changed the mechanics a little bit so that everyone still progressed at the same rate. But they kind of gave them like sorcerer-like abilities where their magic was just stronger, just to show that they were taking the quickest way to power.
Right. So in later levels, both Preservers and Defilers had the ability to expand what they drew upon. So instead of drawing upon just vegetation, they actually had the ability to draw upon the life force of living beings, creatures, even humanoids. And in one of the actual novels that's out there, one of the Sorcerer Kings actually casts a spell and wipes out hundreds, if not thousands, of people because he drew in that much power.
Sometimes you just need some fuel, for the fire. Also too, bringing up the idea of drawing off of sentient creatures or living creatures like animals as opposed to plant life. There was also some magic items that would allow you to channel that as well. So less powerful preservers or defilers, as the case may be, could also access that magic as well.
Now, one of the very interesting things of Athas, you didn't see it very often unless you were prone to getting towards those high-level campaigns, is the Sorceress transformation. Now, we see a little bit of that in the 5th edition Sorcerer under the Origin of the Dragon, but they would actually begin transformation once they hit 20th level. And we talked about, Sorcerer Kings, Dragon Kings, for they are one and the same. The rulers of those cities were in state, depending upon which one you're talking about, in various levels of transformation into becoming a dragon. Now, we're not talking the dragons that we all know and love, but they're definitely more oriented towards that. And that's what the Defilers would begin their transformation towards. The Preservers, on the other hand, were changing into what was called an Avangaion, and those ones actually had the ability to eventually create plant life around them. So it was actually a much more beneficial thing for the world, but the Sorcerer Kings wanted nothing to do with them.
Well, obviously, one, they don't want just any old Defiler becoming a dragon. I'm pretty sure they probably didn't want the other Sorcerer Kings becoming dragons either. Only a few of them actually were able to accomplish this anyway. Because one, they don't want competition, either from Defilers or Preservers. Another thing worth noting too, even though it doesn't directly have anything to do with magic per se, that process was also a hybrid of arcane magic and psionics. You couldn't do it without both components.
Right.
But thankfully in Dark Sun, everybody's got psionics of some sort, so everybody's along the path in that sense.
So the question is, do you guys want to see Dark Sun in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons? We got a place for it. It's called the comments below. While you're at it, like, share, and subscribe.
You can patronize us in a good way over on Patreon.
Or you can follow us on Instagram.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.